Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Shekhar. So, ladies and gentlemen, I just like to welcome all of you on behalf of ABS India to actually spare some time to listen to this webinar. As Dr. Shekhar has just mentioned, our today's topic is the role of genetics in assisted reproductive technologies. So we would cover, various technologies, but would make an impression that why genetics is very important in all the reproductive technologies which we are using or which we are supposed to use in the near future. So if we see about genetic selection and its role in animal breeding, then it is not new. It has been going around for thousands of years, and it has accelerated very much in the last 50 years. If you see even in the Roman era, when the earliest animals were domesticated, still there are evidences of people actually selecting animals for their desired reasons. The reasons may be different for different breeders, different animal owners, but they were definitely selecting. And even after all those years, still the genetic selection is very much in existence, and animals being selected for different reasons by different breeders is very much in existence. Again, we have seen that there has been a massive progress in terms of genetic upgradation in the last 30 years, and in the next several slides, we would come to know why this has happened exponentially in the last few years. With the advent of organized systems, this genetic improvement has to come in place because now everything is linked with profitability. And unless and until there is there is a power of an animal to produce according to the desired level, the breeder is not going to make any profit. We have seen farms established in India with crores of rupees of investment, wherein a lot of money has been invested in infrastructure, in getting all the facilities correct. But if the genetics is not proper, that means the potential is not there to produce, then actually it doesn't give the desired result. And the main, I think, motive of this webinar would be to take you through about why this is very important. So if you see the process of genetic selection, and we are talking about all those last several years, then the mainstay of genetic selection has been visual appraisal. So that means that the people actually see whether it is a cow or it is a bull, they see it visually, and based on certain picture, they actually try to select on the visual appeal. Then people also have selected in the past based on breeding goals. This I am talking of a time when organized breeding practices were not in place. Now I would substantiate this with a few examples. Number one, as you can see in this example, now this is a genetic trait which is known as udder width, rear udder width, and the distance between the hind limbs, maximum, more the distance better the animal is, because more the distance it would provide more space for the udder, more surface area, and more number of mammary glands, and thereby more production. So rear udder width is a now a trait which we evaluate, which we use for our genetic selections. Now, if you compare what happened in say about 50 years ago or 100 years ago, if you see in north of India, people in Haryana or Punjab or Uttar Pradesh, they select any cow and buffalo with one simple principle. They use a steel bucket to actually milk the animal, and their guiding principle is that whether a bucket fits in between the two limbs of the cow or buffalo or not. So what they are essentially looking over here is the udder width. So if the animal cannot hold a steel bucket between the two legs, so if the distance is too narrow, then definitely they opine that the animal is not very good for breeding, the animal is not very good for production. So this is how animals are being selected or were being selected in the past as well, on the basis of the visual appraisal. Second example. Now, it doesn't happen only in cows and buffaloes. In different species as well, there is selection based on breeding goal. In example, if you see in goats, then in goats, maximum goats or the breeds are selected based on their capability to produce 2 kids at a time. There are certain breeds in goats which always give 2 kids, and there are certain breeds wherein you would have only 1 kid per kidding. So definitely the breed which is preferred is the one who gives 2 kids per kidding in all the conditions. So here the selection of in the goats happens based on the breed, and definitely more the number of goats, more profitable it is for the breeder. So the breeds like Osmanabadi, breeds like Kali Bengal goats, they are very much preferred by the breeders. This is again one of the method of conventional selection which is still being followed. Another example. In certain cases we have seen, and I have seen a lot of cases wherein our clients, wherein our breeders always try to select the bulls based on their physical appearance, based on their visual appeal. They always prefer bulls which are bigger in size, which look better, and they here the genetics of the bull is actually taking a back seat. So definitely this is not a good way to actually select the bulls, because a good looking bull, a bull who looks so very giant or huge in size, may not be the perfect solution for any cow. So definitely there are other things other than visual appraisal which have to be taken into consideration before we select any female or a male. What are these things? So other than this, there have been a lot of improvement in the past several years, and we have details on the pedigree. It is parents, grandparents, and further great grandparents. Then we have data on performance of the offsprings, performance of the siblings. Then we have values for the genetic merit, and lastly we have genomic values which help us very much to actually finalize any bull or cow based on the genetic merit. When I say genetic merit is nothing but the potential to produce. So we have a goal in mind. Suppose the goal for any dairy farmer is that he wants a cow which can produce 25 liters of milk per day. So this is the breeding goal, 25 liters of milk per day per cow. Now to achieve that goal, you have to select genetics which can create a potential in a cow which is able to produce 25 liters of milk. If the potential is not there, then any quantity of feed or concentrate fed to that animal would not convert into milk. So the potential has to be created, and that would happen only through genetic selection. Again, in this slide, you would see how different methods of selection actually give us selection accuracy. When we do random selection, whatever appeals to us visually, then the selection accuracy is almost nil. And then we have some data regarding preference on our traits, whatever that is visual, then it may have a selection accuracy of about 30%. Then based on the records or the performance records, selection accuracy increases to 60%. But finally, there is only progeny testing or genomic evaluations which can give us a selection accuracy of 90% or even higher. So these things have evolved in the last 25-30 years, and due to this there has been an exponential improvement in genetics throughout the world, not even in India, throughout the world. So here I would say this is a toolbox which is having numerous tools, and all these tools are for the help of the dairy farmers. All these tools are for the animal husbandry group. All these tools, so what are these tools? We have been using some of them, and definitely we intend to use a lot more others. So these tools are artificial insemination, embryo transfer, then now sex semen has come into picture, in vitro fertilization, gene editing, cloning, bioengineering, precision breeding. So all these are tools which are available to the dairy farmers, and they have used or they intend to use in the future. But you would appreciate that the foundation of using all these tools is genetics. There is no point in doing embryo transfer or IVF in any cow if the genetics is not good. Why would I replicate a cow which is giving me 10 liters of milk? Ideally, I should only replicate a cow which gives 40 liters of milk, because all these reproductive biotechnologies are expensive. And because they are expensive, so we work because we want some return out of an investment. So genetics is the underlying foundation to use all these tools. And if we are not, convinced on genetics, then I don't think it makes much sense to invest in any of the biotechnology tools. Now, historically, the artificial insemination has started in the 1950s throughout the world, including India. India has seen a major improvement in terms of artificial insemination in the 1980s, and the number of animals being inseminated now is increasing every year. Embryo transfer has been started throughout the world in 1970s, then IVF in 1990s. Cloning was done, not in India, but overseas, again in late 1990s, and then sex semen started to be used in 2000. But the major change happened after the genomic evaluations came into picture, and this happened in 2009. In the slides, which we would share later, so you would see how this journey has actually evolved. So this is the journey, this is the entire history of how genetic evolution has happened throughout the world. So a lot of you might have been knowing that we have the DNA cracked in 1953 by Watson and Crick, and then further it was sequenced in 1977. Then a human genome project was launched for the first time in 1990, and there was a draft human genome sequence put in place in 2001. Thereafter, we see numerous species in animals, numerous species in plants, which were genomically decoded. Mouse was done in 2002, 2004 chicken was done, 2005 dog genome was sequenced, then 2007 cat was done, and then in 2009 there was a major improvement in terms of dairy genetics, when the cattle genome was sequenced for the first time in 2009. Again in 2009 the horse genome was sequenced, and the mouse genome was also finished. Pig genome was also done in 2009, and all these actually knowledge, I would say, it was integrated in the projects forward. So much so that after the cattle genome was sequenced in 2009, there was the development of the 750K bovine SNP chip in 2010, which now forms the backbone of all the genomic evaluations performed throughout the globe. In 2013, the first genomic bull was officially launched in India, and now a lot of genomic bulls have been launched by ABS, with every new induction being better than its predecessor. So earlier to genomic evaluations, there was marker assisted selection. There were markers identified wherein the marker was responsible for a set of genes which all together were actually responsible for milk production. So some of them were controlling some hormones, some of them were controlling fat, some of them were controlling protein, and then a concrete or composite genomic evaluation was actually rolled out in 2009, which gave us an opportunity to the farmer to select based on the complete genomic map. So marker, as I told you, it was a piece of DNA molecule that was associated with a certain trait of an organism. But the breeder actually doesn't want that specific trait. Breeder wants a composite thing. So therein, the marker assisted selection actually gave way for genomic evaluation, and that was very easy for farmers to use and evaluate and compare animals available. So the farmers can compare whether a bull is better than the other bull, whether a cow is better than the other cow, and that is how it worked wonders throughout the globe. So as you can see in this graph, there was a lot of genetic gain achieved post genomics. So on the x-axis you can see the years, that is 00 is 2000, and then 15 is 2015. So in the year 2009, where the red bar ends, that was the year when genomic evaluations came into picture. And you would appreciate that after that period, 2009, there was a substantial increase in genetic gain year after year. And the process is continuing with more number of animals being added to the database. So now in the Holstein database, they're close to about data of 90 lakh milking cows. So this definitely has given a lot more, advantage, and this work has now prompted these genomic evaluations to be conducted in all other breeds, species like buffalo, like indigenous breeds as well. So what effect it has made? So if we compare a like-to-like comparison, so you would appreciate that if the animals used total for milk production in the world in 2015, herein we are actually evaluating animals who produced in excess of 20 liters of milk per day. So number of such animals is 9.3 million or 93 lakhs. That means total 93 lakh animals produce milk in 2015 in excess of 20 liters per day. So if we want to, have the same quantity of milk, but the animals would not have been selected based on genomic evaluations, then we would have required 3 crore animals to produce the same volume of milk. So if we would have selected animals based on the old markers, 1970s, 1980s technology, then we would have required 3 crore cows. And now we are producing the same quantity of milk through 93 lakh cows. So this is a huge benefit in terms of, utilizing the space resources, utilizing the feed resources, and a lot more greenhouse gases, a lot of the things. So in fact, a saving of about 76% was made on space, on resources, on labor, on feed. So this is huge. So definitely this has happened only because of exponential gain in genetics. If we see just one single trait, that is milk yield, then the accuracy of this trait was just 0.51 prior to genomics coming into picture, which has now increased to 0.86. And as and when more and more animals would be added to the database, this accuracy would further increase. Further, then we have another breeds and species being sequenced. 2013 the goat genome was sequenced, 2014 the sheep genome was sequenced, and then further we have improved reference genomes in all the species taken up in 2016. Now here again a major development was that there was an integration of disease indexes in 2018. So now the genomic proof also has some integrated disease indexes which were not there earlier. This again is going to be a game changer for the dairy industry because they can select bulls, they can select cows which are comparatively less prone to these diseases. I will take you through these diseases and how this works in the future slides. And after that, so the work in progress or what is being done is in the field of developing indexes for heat tolerance. This again I would take you through in the next slides. So if you see how this works, so we have a composite data in the name of net merit dollars, and in 2018 a need was felt that there should be incorporation of the disease indices in the data. So wherein earlier we developed an Indian index in the name of IDI, or the India Dairy Index, which we always felt was very important to be developed specifically for the Indian needs. In India, we see, I will give you a small example. So in India, we always want the cows to have more fat because the milk is priced on fat. But in European countries, in North America, they actually value more protein, not fat. So definitely in India, we need animals, we need bulls to be selected on fat rather than protein. So we developed an India Dairy Index, which is suitable for Indian conditions, and it is suitable for what the Indian breeders, Indian farmers want. So more weightage was given on daughter pregnancy rate, which is the fertility index. Then calving ability. So it was to be make sure that the cases of dystocia are reduced as much as possible. Productive life, again, this is very, very important for Indian conditions, wherein we want to somehow increase the lactation period. The standard lactation period, as you all might know, it is 300 days. But again, the intercalving period, which should have been one calf per year, that is 365 days, that is more than 500 days. So when the intercalving period, or the period between one calving to another calving is more than 500 days, then can we increase the lactation length? And this definitely can be done by choosing a bull with higher productive life, so that we can have a cow which produces milk for say 350 days rather than 300 days. So this is very much integrated in the Indian Dairy Index, and high weightage was given to productive life. Now I was telling about the diseases. So diseases are mostly transition diseases, and the diseases here are mastitis, metritis, displaced abomasum, retained placenta, ketosis, and milk fever. So all these diseases have now been integrated into the genetics index or into the genomic index of any bull. How this works? So this India Dairy Index I have already shared with you. So this is different than the US index because this gives more weightage to the traits which are required in Indian conditions. So if you see, this is an example of our bull known as Brute. So here on the right hand side, you would see that there is India Dairy Index value given, which is 5883. So it is actually an economical index. If you multiply it by 10, so it would give you about for 58,830 rupees. So this means that if a farmer uses Brute on his cow, then the resulted offspring is going to give a profit in excess of 58,000 rupees as compared to average progeny. So this is the value of how this can be converted into financial profitability for the farmer. Now, we have integrated the disease indexes I have already shared, and this is known as transition right genetics. Now, why transition right genetics? Because it was felt that a lot of these disease conditions happen during the transition period. Transition period is the period which immediately follows after calving. So as soon as the cow gives birth to any calf, then the immediately period which precedes calving activity is the transition period, and all these conditions they happen very much in this transition period. So the problem for the breeder here is that first there is a loss in production, and then there is a loss in profitability. So if the female has less of transition diseases, so definitely the farmer would be in a better position towards profitability. Managing this transition is very, very expensive. During, or immediately after the calving period, if the animal lands up in any of these diseases, mastitis or metritis or ketosis or milk fever, then first there is a huge loss in production. And secondly, there is a cost which the breeder has to incur on getting the cows treated. So this is a double whammy for the breeder. And if now the question is, can genetics play a role in managing these transition diseases? Answer is yes. So these indices have been developed keeping in mind that most of these disorders which happen immediately after calving are addressed if the breeder selects a transition right bull. So the different bulls have different transition right values. So the bull who is the best on transition right values can be selected for any farm where these type of conditions are prevalent. So this would definitely lead to reduction in these conditions and increase the profitability of the dairy farmer. Now there has been a huge research which has been done, across all the countries, and it has been estimated that farmer can lose up to 10% of their herd due to these transition diseases. When we say herd, that means the farmer may either lose the calf or he may also lose the cow. due to these transition diseases. It has also been estimated that the farmer can lose up to 25% on milk production due to these transition diseases. You would appreciate that any condition, whether it is mastitis or metritis or hypocalcemia or ketosis, ultimately takes a huge toll in production. And because there is a loss in production in milk, so the profitability is obviously reduced. So I've already shared this slide previously with you. So after these disease indexes, we now move to what is in the pipeline and what we are doing further to actually enhance the customer experience. And they are the indexes for heat tolerance. So in India, we have a huge problem of animals getting into thermal stress. And it is specifically seen in almost all the parts of India, in North India, South India, all the parts. And it is specifically, the animals are very, this creates a huge problem in the monsoon season when there is high temperature as well as high humidity. So the cows are most efficient when the temperature ranges between 40 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit or about 30 degrees centigrade. So the temperature, if it is less than 30 degrees centigrade, the animal is still comfortable. She eats well, produces well, and then reproduces well. But if there is high temperature and high humidity, then it has a huge deleterious effect, harmful effect on the dairy cows. It reduces the dry matter intake. It reduces the total feed uptake. Thereby, there is a reduction in the milk yield. There is definitely a reduction in fertility. So you would see, and I hope that you can self-check in your own very farm that there is a marked decrease in fertility or conception rate during the period of monsoon months, that is starting from about July to about September or August to September. And there is also an increase in incidence of health disorders. Again, the same question, can we have or can we do something in genetics to get rid of this problem or to minimize this problem? So again, this is a slide which shows how the temperature humidity index, creates stress levels for a cow. The standard threshold value where the animal is comfortable and does not lose on production is 68. So this is a mix and match of what the temperature is and what the humidity level is. So 68 is more or less optimum, and that is shown in this slide in yellow color. Anything above 68 means that the animal is now under stress. As the temperature increases and as the humidity increases, the stress level increases. Animal starts panting. Animal starts to respirate at a higher level. And in this condition, there is excretion of a lot of hormones, which not only take a toll on the production, but also take a toll on the conception rate, as I've already shared. Just to give you an example how this works, so if any inactive person is just sitting, lying idle, and he's weighing about 80 kilograms, then he generates heat which is equivalent to about 100 watt bulb. If you take the same example on a Holstein cow, which is about 700 kilograms body weight, then in idle condition, each such cow produces about energy which is equivalent to 900 watt bulbs. So you can appreciate how much of energy an animal has to take out into the system to become normal, to remain normal, or to remain in the normal productive state. But the problem is, because the outside temperature is high and the outside humidity is high, so she is not able to transfer that heat in the outside environment, and that is the reason why productivity is hampered. So we do a lot of things for the heat stress management in India. We use different cooling strategies. We use foggers. We use shades which are very high. We use fans. So everything we try, but we see that the production continues to decline during these months. So what is the aim of developing these indexes for heat tolerance? The idea is to identify heat tolerant cows and to understand the biological mechanism for thermotolerance. Now, breeding for thermotolerance, is permanent, cumulative, and very, very cost effective. That means if we have selected a set of bulls, a set of cows who are, comparatively, thermotolerant as compared to other animals, then definitely we can, reach to that solution. You would also appreciate that if you have a lot of animals, you would see that some of the animals, they actually, feel that stress level earlier than other animals. So suppose some of the animals can be seen panting in July, and some others, actually start panting in August. So there is a difference in the animals. Again, you would see that in the same conditions, in the same temperature and humidity, some of the animals start panting, say at 12 noon, and some of the animals start panting at 8 a.m. So there is a difference between animal, genetic difference between animals in terms of tolerance of this trait, that the heat trait. So in the first graph here, you can see that there is a decline in performance based on this heat and humidity index, wherein the cow 1 is much more resistant as compared to cow 3. In the second graph, you would see that here the onset of the problem happens very early in cow 3, whereas the onset becomes very, very late in cow 1. So definitely cow 3 has better genes to resist the changes in temperature and humidity as compared to cow 1. Therefore, it is very, very good to believe that the cow 3 should be better selected for heat tolerance rather than cow 1. And similarly, the trait or the SNP has been identified, and we can select bulls based on these traits. So this, this has already been integrated in Australia. See, so if you see here in the production line, you would see a red ring, heat tolerance. So like all other traits, this has already been integrated over there, because you would appreciate that again, this is a trait which is not required in North America because they are very cold. It is not required in Europe. It is just required in countries which are very hot and humid, like in Brazil, like in India, like in Australia, which are very, very hot and humid and similar climates. So this has already been done by ABS in Australia, and we are now working with the Australian team to get these traits now integrated into the Indian system. So this trait would actually help farmers to select the cows who are more resilient towards high temperature and humidity, and they have less impact on milk production. This trait is expressed as percentage with a base value of 100, very easy to understand. So more the value, in excess of 100, the better would be the bull or the cow for this trait. So 105, that means the cow has 5% more tolerance as compared to the average population. The reliability of this trait is 38%, which is average, which is good, and the heritability is about 12%, which is higher than health and fertility traits. So I definitely believe that this is definitely going to work good in India. So, what is the take-home message? So the take-home message over here is that we should select as per the breeding goal. We are already doing that, but now there are a lot of tools which can help us to select the animal as per the breeding goal. Our breeding goal, again, should be sustainable. Sustainable means that we don't want to have an animal which performs good, say, for 2 lactations and then the production goes down. We need a sustainable animal. So it should be good on somatic cell score, it should be good on legs and feet, it should be good on udder, it should be good on health. All these traits put together would make a sustainable animal which would give milk to the Indian farmer for, say, between 6 to 10 lactations. Don't select on appearance. Appearance may be very, very deceptive. We always tend to see, different type of things, and we have seen that it has failed. I would like to show you one example. Let me check. So this is one of our bulls which we have, which we used in the past. So it was a great bull named Daler. A lot of people in north of India have used this bull. So this bull was very much in demand. If you see over here, the sire of this bull is HF10. AHF10 again was a huge bull in CFS Petia Hasargata, but it was an Israeli bull. So this bull was very, very good on all the traits, fertility as well, everything. But it was, the problem was with calving ease. This bull itself was huge. And because it was huge, so there was a problem with dystocia. So as I've said, we have to select animal based on a lot of traits, and it has to be sustainable. So as I say, that appearance may be deceptive. Bigger bull may not be better. It can be better in 10-20% cases, not in all the cases. Then the genomic values give us a very, very good tool to select the animals in any conditions wherever it is available. And then further, we have taken it down to Indianize this, which is known as the India Dairy Index. And you can definitely select bulls based on the Indian Dairy Index. So more the IDI, better would be the bull for Indian conditions. This is a standard thumb rule which you can follow to select the bulls and be more profitable in the time to come. So this is all about the presentation. I would now request you to let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. I request others to ask if there is any doubts or questions.
You can also type your questions in the chat box.
It seems to be no doubts. Good.
All clear?
Looks like all clear.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sir. I have a couple of questions.
Yes,
first
please.
thing, so this as ABS provides artificial intelligence, semen that has all this like temperature, disease control, everything is like accommodated, and then like the offsprings are like more adapted to the temperature and diseases for our conditions, right? That's what you're trying to say. You were saying.
Yes, sir. What we are trying to say is that the trait is now available on the genomic values, and there are bulls with higher values and lower values to address these traits. The temperature or the thermotolerance trait is yet to be integrated. The work is going on, it is yet to be integrated. But the disease resistance trait has already been integrated in 2018. So if you see any of the Holstein bulls on the website, there would be a clear-cut value for these traits, and you can select the best bulls to cover these traits. As I've said, different bulls would have different values. Some would provide better protection as compared to the others. So if the problems are there in the farm, so you have to select the bull who has the best protection.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir. One more question. This is regarding the availability. I'm from Tamil Nadu, Madurai. I have a small farm that's actually started very recently, 1 year back, and I have around 10 cows. I'm trying to, get this ABS straws, and I want to do artificial insemination for my cows. But the availability is very, very kind of, I couldn't get much of information, like I don't know who to talk to. And I think I spoke to Dr. Shekhar from Tanjavur. And is it advisable that we have to own the canister and we have to buy the straws and store it ourselves? Because as a small farmer, a small dairy farm I have, is it like, do you recommend for us to keep store the straws in our farm, or do we have to go and buy? How we have to do?
Sir, I understand your concerns, but it is very, very true that the semen can only be maintained in liquid nitrogen. And there is absolutely no other method to, cryopreserve the semen. So, even if, we have Dr. Shekhar over there, and he's already convener of this webinar as well. So he's in Erode. So the semen is available at Erode, but, and that can be shipped to your location as well. But after getting to your location, you have to get it transferred into your own container and make sure that you have you replenish the liquid nitrogen every now and then, because there is no other way wherein we can store and maintain the semen in good quality.
Yeah, Dr. In addition in addition to that, what Dr. Rahul has said, I have already typed the local contact number of our distributor who is in Tanjavur, and his number is typed. You can speak to him, and I'll also help you to get it done. Don't worry, sir.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you, sir.
Yep, thank you.
Very, very helpful.
Dr. Yeah, so now I'll move to the next step. Dr. We have received two more questions. One is particularly on the buffalo side. So, hi, yes. Buffalo population is 48% in India. What is our progress on buffalo sires? When can we expect better bulls than Redu and Bahubali?
Okay. So, we are working on that. And as a matter of fact, during this presentation, I think I have missed, but it is true that the buffalo has not been genomically evaluated till now, or it has not been genomically decoded till now. Although we are having the highest number of buffaloes in the world, but still the buffalo is not being genetically decoded. And we are working towards this direction for the past 8 years, but the process is, I would say the process is very long, wherein you have to first make it very clear that you are identifying one proper breed. Then the data to be collected for all, the reference population has to be from F1 generation only. That is, you can collect the data from only, first calving animals. So these are the challenges, and then it has to be from different geographical locations and different conditions. So all this put together, we are trying our level best for the past 8 years now to integrate this information. We have developed, certain traits which are different than the ones being used for cattle. I would like to give you a few examples. We have integrated traits like milk letdown, which is very, very important in buffalo, because you would see that the buffaloes invariably, they does not let down the milk in absence of the calf. And the second trait we have integrated is the length of the lactation. There are a lot of buffaloes who stop producing milk at about 200 days, at about 220 days, which is a big problem. So we have tried to integrate and select buffaloes who have a longer lactation length, but never less than 270 days in any case. So these are the two things which we have very much integrated. And as I've already shared, it was not just possible to just copy, cut, and paste the genomic proofs in cattle, because buffalo behaves very, very differently in terms of estrus, in terms of other things. So first few years just went by in getting the ideal blueprint for how to the buffalo to be evaluated, and then now we have started recording the data. So I think it is a matter of time, but definitely we are working on buffalo. We appreciate that most of the dairy processors they are collecting more buffalo milk for value products rather than cow milk, and we are working towards that. So I think it would definitely come in the years to come.
Yeah, I think am I audible, Dr. Gunnar Shekhar?
Yes. Sir, good afternoon, sir. This is
Rahul sir, namaskar.
Manveer sir. Sir, welcome, sir. Dr. Manveer is my colleague, has been my colleague in Uttarakhand, and he is now with NDDB. Welcome, sir.
So I got a chance to listen to you again, sir.
Yeah. My pleasure, sir. Pleasure is all mine.
Yeah. So there's a one information just I want to add, whatever sir said, that NDDV has worked on this buffalo genomic side, and they have developed a chip for Murrah, just to inform.
So here the question is whether the chip is available for other people or other organizations as well.
Yeah, that can be discussed at a different platform, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Right, sir. The next question is, all buffalo sires are born in ABS farm or procured from outside?
No, they are born in ABS farm as well, and then, not ABS farm actually. We have a joint venture with Chitle Dairy, and they have been working, in Buffalo for now 79th year. So they are pretty old in buffalo breeding, and that is the farm wherein we have taken different traits, like I've already shared with you, milk let down and the lactation length. So most of the bulls have been selected from that farm, but definitely we have selected a lot of bulls from the state of Haryana and Punjab.
Thank you, sir.
And we are continuing to do so. Wherever we find good bulls who have the proper records, who are true to breed, who are disease free, we are regularly looking after those bulls, and then we are procuring them.
Okay, so this question is about Troy and Spartan. Was the Holstein used to develop Troy and Spartan bulls were genomic?
Yes. So at that point of time, when these bulls were created, genomics was, I would say, not into picture. So these bulls were actually progeny tested. Both the sires of Troy and Spartan are progeny tested.
Thank you, sir. That's good. What is the kappa casein of the A2 bulls?
Okay. So it is a protein. It is a protein found in milk, and we actually classify it as A1 or A2. And all buffaloes are A2, but you would find that almost 50% of the exotic animals in the world, they are either A1 or A2. It exactly moves like the blood group, wherein we have different blood groups. So the assortment actually decides between the sire and the dam that what would be the beta casein in the offspring. We have seen a lot of animals even in indigenous breeds, in zebu breeds, which are A1. So I would say that milk is the most healthy thing to have anywhere in the world. Whether it is A1 or A2, I think that doesn't matter.
Sir, nice presentation, sir.
Sir.
This is the basic problem in India with the HF cows is heat tolerance and mastitis.
Yes.
According to your presentation, very soon we'll be getting from ABS with high heat tolerance and mastitis.
Yes, mastitis is already integrated, sir. As I've shared with you, the disease traits have already been integrated in 2018. We are working on heat resilience now. Yes.
Next question is, it's written like this. I'll read out. Any Holstein bull or Jersey bulls having very close milk similarity to Sahiwal bulls?
Yes, definitely. When we talk about any population, you have a wide variation in the population, and variation is the thing which is the backbone of selection. If there would have not been any variation, then how would selection happen? People always ask me that there has been a lot of improvement in Gir breed done by Brazil, and so all the Gir animals in Brazil have somehow originated in India, and they have been shipped to Brazil maybe about 100 years ago. So how they improved? They improved using the basic genetic tools, which are selection and culling. That means they had a huge population. Out of those population, they selected the top 20%, suppose, and they slaughtered or they removed the balance 80%. So when you keep on doing this generation after generation, then you improve. Likewise, we would have animals in Jersey and Holstein who have, fat and SNF, which is comparable to the indigenous animals. But these were actually never selected for these type of traits. They were selected for an average fat, average protein, and high volume of milk. That is how they were selected. If in the breeding philosophy we would have selected differently, that is average milk, high fat, high protein, then they would more or less be similar to indigenous zebu animals.
Yeah. So the next question, what is the ideal climatic conditions where the insemination should be done to get high consumption rate? Does our HF and jerseys have the heat tolerance compared to indigenous breeds? Two questions.
So this is very good question, and this is definitely a problem which we are facing in India and across the globe, that we always see complaints that the conception rate is low. Now, when I was taught reproduction, then I still remember that I was told that when it comes to reproduction in animals, then it is a luxury. So what is the meaning of this phrase? The meaning is that the animal would only reproduce or only conceive when all other parameters for sustainability are available. The animal should have proper feed, proper management, proper housing. Everything should be okay. Then only the animal would conceive. So when there is a problem of high heat and high humidity, animal is under stress and animal starts panting. So when the animal is under stress, she is not feeding properly. There is a lot of stress on the system. The animal is not getting enough water. The animal is not getting enough cooling. Then definitely reproduction is hampered. It is true that the zebu breeds, they have a trait of more disease tolerance as compared to Holstein and Jersey. But now over the last several years, if we get the construction right, the management right, I think a lot of problems would be resolved. I have seen throughout India a lot of animal sheds where our Holstein animals are kept are designed in such a way that there is a corrugated steel roof, and then which is about maybe 10 feet high, and then you have a ceiling fan on top of the animal. So this is not going to help. You appreciate that the entire heat of the sun is falling on the corrugated steel sheet, then the fan actually is transmitting all that heat onto the animal 24/7. And we still actually hope that the animal will perform to its capacity. It is not going to happen. We have to have roof at high level, maybe about 14-15 feet. We have to have ventilators instead of that ceiling fan. Just by correcting these things, we can improve the productivity. We can maintain the animal in comparatively stress-free conditions. So I think all these items have a huge role in animal productivity. We cannot just say that Holstein is not a good producer. It is not true. No, it is the most successful breed in dairy farming throughout the world. The farms which are in UAE, which rear animals in 45 degrees centigrade temperature, they are all having Holstein animals. The largest farm in the world, Almarai Dairy, having 1.5 lakh animals, is having all Holstein animals. So we have to, maintain a good housing. We have to maintain good feeding. Then these problems, or part of it, would definitely be resolved.
Yeah. Thank you, Doctor. Next question is there any technologies to identify whether the cows are in early, mid, and last phase of heat while doing AI?
Well, in all my career, I have felt that this capability has definitely been endowed by the God to the bull. And bull is the best to identify the proper stage of the heat. As far as we human beings are concerned, I myself has been an inseminator. I have inseminated a lot of animals. I strongly believe that this is a faculty which we have to develop by experience. There are definitely symptoms, but symptoms are very specific. Like, at the end of the estrus, we may have some bleeding in animals, some animals. So bleeding signifies that the estrus or the heat period is ended. But it would happen in some of the animals, and it has nothing to do with conception or non-conception. So this is something which is very physiological. But as far as early, mid and late heat is concerned, there are definitely symptoms. At this point of time, I would only like to share that there are visible differences in the quality of the cervical mucus, which originates from the cervix during estrus. In the initial stages, it is very, very thick. In the later stages, it becomes, I would say, less thick. And then based on these biochemical characteristics, we can identify these things. But definitely a lot of other things are also there in the picture.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Now we are still open for another 4 minutes.
Good afternoon, Doctor. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Shankar from Coimbatore.
Sir, how to analyze this genomic values, ideal genomic values?
So genomic values actually can be evaluated, only by having a DNA sample of that, animal. It may be a male, it may be a female. So once we have the DNA sample of that animal and the pedigree for at least one generation. So it has to have a known pedigree of at least the sire and the dam. Then we can be able to do the genomic evaluation. We can also run a genomic evaluation without the details of the parents, but that would not be, that would have very less reliability.
Hello.
What my question is, after getting values, how we predict it is a good or we have to select or not, like that, with respect to udder conformation, with respect to heat tolerance, like that. How we have to
so what is done is that after we get the genomic values, then the genomic values are compared with the standard reference population. As I've told you, that standard reference population for Holstein is about 90 lakhs now globally. So it is compared, that data is compared with the standard reference population. And either the values are in negative, that is less than the average, or they are more than the average. So based on that, you get the result that whether it is good to use or not good to use.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir.
Dr. Gauri Shankar.
Yes, sir.
Basically, in India, the main problem is the less productivity per cow per day or per lactation.
Yes, sir.
From the day we graduated 40 years before, we have been seeing the cross breeding.
Yes, sir.
But even today, our average yield of the cow is not crossing 1,500 liters in lactation.
Sir.
So it is less than 7-8 liters or less than 10 liters.
Yes, sir.
Suppose we increase it to 15 liters on a whole.
Yes. Yeah.
We can improve our production, or we can double our production with the same number of animals.
Yes, sir.
That will save lot of fodder, lot of resources.
Yes, sir.
But how do we do it? Because all farmers are small farmers having 2-3 animals. How do they know about the genomics? How do they know about the selection? We are not talking about the 40 liters or 30 liters. We are only just talking about 15 liters. If they get 15 liters in 300 days, 4,000 liters is very big magic figure.
Sir, you are very right, sir. The question is also, the question is very, very pertinent.
It is not only ABS. Sir. There are cooperatives, there are private companies, there are doctors working in the animal husbandry, there are private practitioners on their own. How do we make this change happen?
Yes, sir. So I would tell you, sir, how it is happening, and we definitely are working towards this. But how it happens is, so I am yet to actually come to a farmer who says that I don't want the best semen to be used in my cow or buffalo. Farmer is always wants the best product, like he wants the best seed for his crop, he wants the best semen for his cow or buffalo. Who is the decision maker? Decision maker is actually the inseminator, or the flag bearer is the inseminator. When we started this business in India, sir, we did a pan-India survey, and it was an anonymous survey covering the farmers, inseminators, veterinary doctors, and one of the questions was, how the semen is selected for a particular artificial insemination? And the top answer was as per availability of semen in the tank. So whatever is available in the tank at that point of time is the best semen at that point of time. Number one. Number two, another answer was when is the best time to inseminate? Whenever any inseminator reaches the farm of a dairy farmer, that is the best time to inseminate. So, there is a procedural problem. I am saying that best semen is available. The farmer, now we are seeing, a group of farmers who ask, what is this semen? Now the entire baseline is that the farmer has to realize that we are into genetics business. We are not into, the business of getting the cow pregnant or buffalo pregnant. That can be done using any animal. That is not much of a problem. Genetics is something wherein we always believe that the calf should produce better than its mother. Then only it is genetics. So when the farmer asks that he wants to know what the semen has been used, what is forget sir about potential, but at least the farmer should know that the last time he has used, say, certain semen which has a capacity for 15 liters. So at least this time he has to use about 15 liters, not 5 liters. And this is exactly what has happened, that over the period of time, a lot of semen, good, bad, that has been used in different populations. So the farmers are getting agile. They are now asking, and we make it a point. We always say farmers that please keep the empty straw. You paste it on a notebook and keep the empty straw with you. So a lot of farmers are also now doing that, and I think this is improving, because again this is a question about profitability. If the farmer is not getting enough milk from the animal, it has to be a loss-making business, and ultimately the poor farmer has to close it down. You are very right, sir. This is very, very important, and this is something which has to be taken, the message has to be taken across to the farmer, not to the user, I would say.
Okay, thank you.
Sir.
Thank you, sir. I think the next question is also answered in the previous answer itself. There is a question, like a fundamental question. Welcome. Correct analysis from ABS doctor. We are still producing no milk after many, like 30 years. So that's a comment.
I would say, sir, that it is actually, don't lose heart. Don't lose heart, and definitely we have made a lot of improvement, but I would say it has been very limited. The people who realize the value of genetics, the people who realize the value, in some of the cases we see that the people always are after money, whether it is a 10 rupee straw or it is a 15 rupee straw. I always tell that please see the genetics behind this, and then you take the decision wisely. It is not a question about 10 or 15 rupees. It is the question of losing 2 years. How the farmer is going to lose 2 years? You use the wrong semen. 9 months, 9 days, that is the period of pregnancy, goes away because now the animal is pregnant. And then another 1.5 years or 1 year till the time the animal starts producing. So you have lost 2 years, and then you realize that the animal is just giving 5 liters of milk. So that is a huge loss. That is a huge loss. 2 years lost, which can never be recouped. So choose the semen wisely.
Yeah, doctor, we have all farmers having a smartphone, and
Sir.
everybody is now having WhatsApp.
Sir.
Like Geo or Relates, Mr. Mukesh is trying to do.
Sir.
For the trade. Can we connect all the farmers and make this education about selecting the straw or keeping them shielded from the unscrupulous inseminators or the elements which use the low cost straw or even straw without a semen?
Sir, we are trying, through these extension activities, and we have also, from day one, we are very clear, and we also ask all our farmers that the semen comes with a bill. Semen is not something which should not have any invoice. So please ask for invoice always for the bill. That is number one. Number two is that we have a sort of a top club card, we call it as. It is like a credit or a debit card, which has a specific number. So each purchase or sale made by any individual, that gets recorded. So first and foremost, it is about genuinity of the product. And number two, all the activities related to, extension activities that percolate directly to the farmer. This is free of cost. So anyone who buys the product gets the card free of cost. But he is getting to all these facilities, these extension activities, and I sir myself is running Siemens station for the last 20 years. It gives me immense pain to feel that people are getting counterfeit product. So again, this is a tool to check counterfeiting of Siemens.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. We will have last two questions. One is Ganpati is genomic tested?
No, sir. Ganpati is not genomic tested. The sire is a progeny tested bull, or rather, I would say that the semen was imported from Brazil. So he is the son of the progeny tested Gir bull. He is not genomically tested. Brazil is working on genomic evaluation of Gir breed. As soon as they come up with the final, genomic proof, I think these bulls can also be run on that proof.
Yeah. So the next question is, sir, we are about to start with ABS semen. So I needed to, from which type to start, as we did not get any suggestions from inseminator. Which bull to start with?
Okay, sir, I could request that, whatever state you are in, please let us know, and we would ask our local representative to contact you, because it also depends upon which of the breeds you are having, what is the type of production you are looking at, and what are the conditions. Based on that, I think we would be able to give you some choices, and out of those choices, you can make the selection.
Right, Dr. Saab, I think we can close now. We got very good questions and answers. I would like to conclude this meeting with a big thanks to all of you who has participated from your busy schedule. Actually, we have started this series like one meeting in Hindi, another meeting in English, followed by regional languages. So every Friday, 12 to 1, some webinar will be happening from ABS side. You can forward. See, basically, we are trying to create a platform where this is like more of knowledge sharing. It's not like we know something different or something has to be passed on. Like I really appreciate Dr. Gauri Shankar. He's one of the leading nutritionists, and I think mostly he's the most senior, most experienced. He's more than my years, more than my age. Is his experience. So he is asking questions. So that is what excites us. Like still he's trying to learn with a piece of paper and
my wishes, sir.
So that's how we feel blessed, and we feel great of taking this initiative. Without your participation, these meetings would not get more successful. So definitely we are going to continue with a lot of different topics related to dairy farming. So since we are a genetic company, we started with genetics. So every Friday 12 to 1, some webinar will be happening in any one of the languages throughout India. And the first two are like national, like one is in Hindi, another one like second one is in English. So next week will be in regional languages, followed by another week also regional languages. So that's how we have scheduled our webinar day. So this Friday 12 to 1 is focusing towards ABS hour. So in case if you want to learn something new, please drop an email. I have already typed the email ID, and all of your email IDs are recorded in our system. So regularly we keep on sending the data to you. If you want to share some feedback, you please share us. Definitely your participation will help us. As Dr. Gauri Shankar was suggesting, it is more of transferring the knowledge to the end user. When dairy farmers are successful, everybody would become successful, whether it is an inseminator or doctors or the companies or the people associated. So ultimately the goal is to make the dairy farming practices more profitable. And so finally, I thank our internal team members, those who have worked hard to bring a lot of guests from different parts of the country. And we would like to conclude now. If you have any suggestions, please drop an email and we would be happy to respond to that email. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Saab.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.